Welcome to Comic Watchers, episode 253, where we were having technical difficulties. But we're here now. Our guest this evening is Matthew Rosenberg. How's it going, man?
It's going good. Thanks for having me.
Well, sorry for the technical difficulties. It always happens.
Yeah. It's I'm well versed in them. I feel like every time I have to get on a Zoom call, I suddenly don't have the most current version of Zoom, and I don't understand. Either they update it every week, or my computer is deleting it when I use it. I don't know.
Well, we're here now, and I'm glad that you were able to join us. And before we get talking about your latest or your upcoming book, tell us a little bit about yourself as a comic book reader and as a creator.
Yeah. So my name's Matthew Rosenberg. I'm from New York City, New York, America, and I grew up in New York, and both my parents were writers, so I was sort of very much encouraged to be a reader from a very young age. And I grew up with a comic book store on my block, so that was kind of the first ever place I went on my own. It was the first place I ever spent $1 on my own. So that sort of, it's weird to look back and be like, oh yeah, 30 some odd years later, that's kind of foundational moment for me and shaped my whole life, but it did. Maybe there's some parts of it that it didn't shape, but for the most part, my life is shaped by that comic book store and falling in love with the stuff I found there. And yeah, I've just been a lifelong fan. And when I was a kid, I think like a lot of kids, I dreamed of making comics, and then when I didn't draw like Jim Lee or Todd McFarlane, I gave up pretty quick. Those guys are very talented, and then my 10-year-old hands were not capable of doing what they do. And yeah, I went and pursued other stuff, but I always was a comic book fan, and it wasn't until I was much older and I was working in the music business and sort of getting really sick of it. I love music. I do not like the music business. I was trying to think of something else I should do, and the only thing I like as much as music is comics. And so I was like, maybe I'll try and write comics and see how it goes. And I didn't know anyone who made comics. I didn't have friends who made comics. I didn't even have a lot of friends who read comics at that point. And I was just like, I'm gonna try and do it. And I just dove in and sort of tried to teach myself how to make comics. And yeah, now here I am, and I've done a bunch of stuff. I wrote some indie books for Black Mass Studios. My first book is a book called 12 Reasons to Die, which I did with some of the guys from the Wu-Tang Clan. And then I made a book called We Can Never Go Home that was kind of a moderate indie hit. And then I made a book called Four Kids Walking to a Bank, which was a less moderate indie hit. And from there, I was doing stuff at Marvel, and I was at Marvel for a long time. I was exclusive writer at Marvel for years. And in the last few years, I switched teams, and I'm a DC writer. And I make a book called What's the First Place from Here at Image, which is on issue 22 is coming up. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And there was pit stops along the way. I did some stuff at Archie and a few shorts here and there, but mostly that's it. It's just Marvel, DC, Black Mask, and Image is most of my career.
Now, do you remember maybe the first comic book that you picked up?
So yeah, the first comic I ever read was I have an older brother, and he would read comics, and so I would, of course, he would do the older brother thing of saying, don't touch these, don't look at these, and he would go out for the day, and I would sneak into his room and read them. And those were I'm not one of those people who knows the exact issue numbers, but he was reading the Claremont X-Men run, which was like hugely impactful for me. And then he had a bunch of Batman and Superboy stuff. I don't know why those two particularly, but that's what he had other stuff, but those are the ones I really remember. It was Superboy, Batman, and Uncanny. And those were things that I was reading that were around the house. But then the first stuff I started buying, I was very obsessed with the Marvel G.I. Joe book, and I was trying to buy all of the Marvel G.I. Joe book, and some of those were very expensive, and out of print, and it was, you know, a little bit before they were doing collection editions of everything, and so I was really like saving up my money and hunting those down and going to Comic Cons, and that was my first run that I really collected was Marvel G.I. Joe.
So you have a new book coming out next month. Well, it's almost March.
Sure.
One
Yeah.
more day.
Yeah, we're coming out yes, in weeks. Yeah, I have a new book at Image that I'm doing an Image with my friend Stefano Landini. We did The Punisher together for a little bit, and we did a little bit of Star Wars stuff, um we did a grifter story at DC, but this is our first creator run together, and it's called We're Taking Everyone Down With Us, and it's sort of a sci-fi spy thriller coming of age dark comedy adventure family drama. It's really difficult to talk about because it's kind of a lot of things, which is what I like to do. And you know, I sometimes I'm jealous of the people who are like, yeah, it's just like, you know, what if the Muppets were in Texas Chainsaw Massacre? And it's like, well, yeah, you go with the book is. I don't really have that with my book. um but yeah, I mean, it's just a lot. It's just sort of a love letter to a lot of the stuff that me and Stefano really love, like, you know, like 60s and 70s Bond stuff and sort of buddy road trip comedies and things like that. um it's fun. It's a fun book. I think I have fun making it. I can't objectively say that it's fun for a reader, but I have fun making it.
Well, other than just the larger, were there any like specific inspirations that kind of fueled this series?
Yeah, so the book actually has a weird origin because me and Stefano were actually going to do a book together at Marvel right before the pandemic, and we were working on it and we're very excited. And then that book sort of switched editorial hands in the pandemic. Things were paused and there was a lot of confusion. And we ended up not doing the book. A different creative team ended up doing the book. And um, but Stefano wanted to go and make something. He wanted to do a book with me, and that's always flattering as a writer when an artist is like, I would like to work with you. It's usually the other way around. And I said, yeah. And he said, I actually have an idea. And he sent a drawing of a robot that he had, and he was like, this is it. And I was like, that's not an idea for a book, man. That's a drawing of a robot. And but actually there was a lot behind it, and there was sort of, he wanted to do a spy thing. He wanted to do a sort of sexy Italian style 70s spy thing, and you know, there. And so I took that and sort of ran with it and made it my own kind of thing. And so definitely stuff like James Bond is a big influence, and you know, like Danger Diabolique, and you know, like we're as much as you may not see it on the page, you know, like the films of like Mario Bava and Dario Argento and people like that are definitely an influence. Some of it you probably will see on the page. But then that was sort of where Stefano was coming from, but I sort of came from a different direction on it. I knew he wanted to do a spy thing, and I love James Bond. I'm a huge Bond fan. Like, you know, I see every movie the day it comes out. I read all the books. I own all the Blu-rays. But James Bond is, you know, sort of a problematic fave. He's you know, he's not treating people great. He's assassinating people for the government, which I don't think is necessarily great, to just be secretly killing people for a government. So part of my idea was I wanted to honor what Stefano wanted to do of doing this book with this robot and have a kind of spy thing, but also a little bit dismantle some of those ideas in a loving way. So it's not a parody of that stuff, but it has sort of humorous moments to it. But it also is like a big part of it for me was I don't love, and this isn't particular to Bond or spy movies or anything, but just the sort of the way we portray violence in both fiction and in just the regular narrative of Western culture is sort of as this binary of like there's a victim and a perpetrator, and that's actually, I think, very disingenuous. I think the idea of violence is something that really ripples down through generations and tears families apart and communities and all these things. And so that was sort of an idea for me, is like I want to do a traditional kind of Bond style spy story, but switch who the focus is. So our
Mhm.
focus is not either the hero, the spy, or the villain, but it's actually the daughter of the villain. It's the 13-year-old daughter, Annalise, and sort of she is our protagonist. And you see how this sort of the idea of the Bond kind of machine impacts her and affects her, and what it does to her, and what that whole lifestyle does to her. So those were like sort of the big inspirations. We started from a place of sexy spies and wacky hijinks, and sort of made it a little both funnier and more intense was our goal, I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah. So, um, you've mentioned the daughter as the main character. Who are the other main characters in the book that we kind of follow, and that's in the story?
Yeah. So I mean there's a few. The her father, Annalise's father, Dante, is sort of this world-renowned mad scientist who's been in hiding for a decade or more. And he's sort of this heavy presence in her life because she lives on a secluded island with him, and he's sort of all she knows. And so he's this very like he's both very loving but also incredibly dysfunctional and difficult um to be around. And so he's a big figure, but he also has created this army of these robotic helper bodyguard assistants. And so that's sort of who she spends her day to day with, is these robots that are both more human than you'd expect, but also very alien at the same time. They don't give her the sort of affection she expects, but they're also like kind of remarkably similar to her father and how sort of clinical and cold he is sometimes. And so the main push of the book is sort of Annalise and one of these robots going out on their own. But the other half of the coin is there's a spy, there's a sort of super spy who has been hunting her father for years and years, and his name is Alistair Rook, and he's sort of a James Bond esque character, but he's sort of taken to an extreme. He's sort of a pill loving, drug loving, loose cannon, um, to a wild degree, and he's sort of both hunting. He's sort of both predator and prey in the story as we go
Mhm.
on.
So, who are the other members of the creative team that are working with you on the book?
Yeah, so like I said, it's I started the book with Stefano Landini, who's just amazing. We worked together on The Punisher for a little bit, and some Star Wars stuff, but he's just got this amazing resume. He's worked on Hellblazer, he was the artist on Daredevil for a bit. He's the artist on Black Panther and X-Men, and did some French graphic novels, and he just did Prodigy with Mark Miller. He's just done a ton, and I really, um, if anything from this book, if people take anything from this book, I sort of want them to fall in love with Stefano's work. He's, I think, one of the great underrated artists in comics right now. He's sort of this incredible triple threat that he can do these big bombastic action scenes so well, but he can do comedy and just sort of simple storytelling and real acting of the characters. He's like a master at this stuff, without ever sacrificing how readable a page is. Like you're never taken out off the page. You're always sort of it's very immersive. He's just an incredibly immersive storyteller. And so he and I started the book together. He and I started the book together, and I do a book called What's the First Place from Here at Image also, and our colorist on that book at the time, Roman Titov, who's an amazing colorist and just sort of a very unique perspective on comic color. I asked him to come over to this book, and he did. And then because he's so good, he got poached by the video game industry, and he took a day job and had to leave our book and leave What's the First Place from Here, which was heartbreaking, but he helped shape those books, and I'm forever grateful to him. And we got a new colorist on What's the First Place from Here, and that's Jason Wordy, and he's also a brilliant colorist, just a really, like, I think going to be one of the great colorists of all time when all is said and done. And Jason was doing so good on What's the First Place from Here, we asked him if I offered to let him start over from page one on the book and sort of throw out everything Roman did, which pained me because I loved what Roman did, but I thought that was respectful of Jason, and Jason's just a true professional, and he looked at it and he said, no, I get what he did. I think it's really cool. I would like to build on it and sort of add to it. And I wasn't sure how that would look and what that would be like, but then he came in and did it. And yeah, they're just sort of this amazing team because sort of Roman set the tone and Jason is now running with it and making something. And then after that, Hassan Otsmain Elhau is our letterer. He's the best letterer in comics, and he's untouchable. I don't have anything else to say other than he's the best letterer in comics. He just makes everything better.
But that kind of, just encompasses it all.
yeah. I could fumble around and say something else, but yeah, he's the best. Like, of all the people who do it, he does it better than them. There's a lot of great. I've worked with a lot of great letterers, and I've been very privileged to work with a lot of the best in the business. And me and Hass just sort of get each other. I think he knows when to take risks and do interesting things on the page and let the letters stand out, and when to, like, pull it back and let the art be front and center. And I love that. He's got a better eye for that than anyone.
Was it was it your idea or his idea? Because in the book there's the point where she's like looking through the beaker and speaking, and that was so awesome.
That is so awesome. Yeah, that was Hass all the way, and he sent it to me and said, "Yeah, I just did this for fun. We don't have to leave it in the book." And I was like, "No, we're leaving that in the book. It rules." Yeah, he's always coming up with stuff like that, and it's just really making the lettering, a real art. He's just an artist, and I think of him just as much a visual artist on the team as everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm so tired. I feel I'm worried I'm going to forget people, even though not that many people work on the book. Becca Carey, who's amazing and does stuff, like, she does a lot of lettering, and she letters, and she's great. She letters Radiant Black and works on some other books, but she's a brilliant graphic designer, and so she did our logos and our credits pages and everything. And then my editors are Steve Fox, who's a great editor. He edits a lot of stuff for James Tynion. He edits, World Tree and Department of Truth and the Deviant. But he's also a great writer. He does a lot of stuff at Marvel, a lot of stuff in the Spider-Man and X-Men offices. And then Eric Harburn, who was the head editor at Boom for a long time, and sort of is the guy who made, helped co-create Something's Killing the Children. And they work at Tiny Onion, which is James Tynion's company, and I use them, and so they're my editing team and production company.
So is the current book, is it an ongoing? Is it a limited series, or are you kind of just still kind of getting the feel for it?
So yeah, it's a complicated answer. The market is very tough right now for new books, and it takes us a long time. The issues are oversized, so it takes us an extra long time to make them, and we really don't ever want to sacrifice anything in doing them. And so when we started making the book, we set out to do 6 issues, and that was the whole story. And then partway through, I kept thinking that I was really falling in love with the characters in the world, and sort of my brain just kept spinning out on where things could go from there, from these 6 issues. And it wasn't until issue 3 where Stefano was like, "I really love this book, man. It feels really special to me. I wish we could do more." And I said, "Well, if we ever get the chance to do more, this is what I'd like to do." And I talked to him about it, and he was like, "Oh, I want to do that. I want to do that book." And so we all have Netflix accounts. I don't want people to think that if we only make 6 issues, they're getting half a story and then they're like, I fell in love with this and they never finished it. The 6 issue story we're putting out is what we set out to do. If people pick it up and like it and we have steady readers, we have more we want to do and sort of would continue it. But so right now, it'll probably be, if we do end up doing it, it'll probably be like a sort of seasons model where it's not just a monthly book, but we'll do it. We'll take a little break. We'll come back. But right now it's up in the air because we don't know if anyone likes the book. So I don't want to commit to doing 20 issues of something and then find out that me and Stefano are the only two people who like it.
Well, I think people are going to like it. So
Well, I hope so. There's a lot of good books. There's money is tight and there's a lot of good books. I can't guarantee that people show up. I hope they do. We're sort of pouring our all into it and trying to make something that feels really special to us and hopefully it feels special to readers.
So you're writing, you do your creator-owned stuff. Plus, you're currently writing the DC vampire. Do you have to like schedule like today I'm writing my stuff, tomorrow I'm writing?
No, I spent so long at Marvel first and then at DC doing, between 5 and 7 or 8 books a month sometimes, that the schedule is just the person who's most yelling at you that they need stuff from you gets what they need. It's just, I used to call it like just putting out fires. Like you're just always, whatever's the most on fire is what you deal with. It's not the best way to work creatively. It's not the healthiest way to work for, your body. And it's, so I've tried to pull back from that a little. So I'm doing DC versus Vampire still because I love that book and we've been doing it for almost 30 issues now. And, it's a ton of fun, but I sort of stepped off all the other stuff I was doing at DC to kind of focus on we're taking everyone down with us. What's the first place from here? And then I'm building some other creator-owned books that are going to be announced later in the year, beginning of next year, or actually some of them are going to be announced at the end of next year. But I'm still working on them now because I want to take my time and do them right. And so it's a little easier to schedule. Like this week is for this book and this week is for this book. But things always change. Things come up. Someone, falls behind schedule. Someone moves ahead of schedule, and you sort of have to juggle to keep everyone. Without a script, no one else can work. So I have to make sure that everybody. I'm the first person who has to work on every project. So there's always a little bit of trying to run, laying down track to stay ahead of the moving train.
Right. Well, I've been enjoying the DC vampire stuff, and they've kind of let you have the entire sandbox to play with.
Yeah, it's been cool. When I came up in Marvel and Marvel, I love What If, and I think Marvel readers are a little more accepting of that stuff now with the multiverse stuff, but there's still not a buy-in from the Marvel audience the way there is a DC for Elseworld stuff. Like some of the best DC stories, some of the most beloved stuff, like the Dark Knight stuff and Kingdom Come and
Gotham by Gaslight.
Gotham by Gaslight, Superman Red Sun, like a ton of these are Elseworlds books. And the last few years, like Injustice and Deceased, and there's just a ton of stuff that like the audience shows up for it and it's really fun. And I didn't used to understand creators always seem to be having so much fun on those, and I was like, yeah, it's fine, but continuity is really fun. And I still believe that. I love continuity. I love playing in a universe that's all connected, but there is something very liberating about just being like, we're going to do whatever we want and having the audience like that. I mean, you can always try and do whatever you want, and sometimes the audience doesn't want to see you rip Batman's heart out or kill Superman or turn Wonder Woman into a monster or break the Flash's neck or all these things that we've done. But the audience is great. The audience that shows up, they show up every month for new issues, and they sort of understand that we're doing these things from a place of love, because we love these characters so much. But the thing that makes them great is that, like, they're such important characters that are such a cultural touchstone that people understand that you can't really break them. We can't damage them. There's nothing I could put in DC versus vampires that would make people be like, I don't like Superman anymore. Like, Superman is so much bigger than us in our book, and Batman is so much bigger. And the audience comes in knowing that. And so that allows you to sort of be like, we know that, we're putting that aside. So let's just do a fun Superman thing, a fun Batman thing you wouldn't normally see. And, let's turn Superman into a vampire and see how that goes. And it's very fun because it's gets you a chance to do things that you couldn't normally do, and people like that. People like to see you push things as hard as you can and as far as you can, and that's what we're trying to do. And
I mean, the one shot that just came out where it was like, oh, the Wonder Woman story, and then the Alfred is the Green Lantern.
Yeah,
that would I mean, that was a nice dichotomy, I guess, of seeing how twisted Diana's become, and then you see Alfred, trying to step into that role, and then just the whole Guy Gardner thing with his lower body was just fun.
Thank you. Yeah, the Guy Gardner is my favorite Green Lantern by a lot, and I've been saving him in the whole book. Like, we killed a bunch of the other ones. We killed Hal. We killed Kyle. We killed John. And I was like, I don't want to use Guy until I know that I can do something cool with him that people will remember. And I didn't know what that was. And I fully thought we were going to finish this volume of the book and I wasn't going to have Guy appear. And then the one shot came up and I was like, well, it's an Alfred story. It's an Alfred as Green Lantern story. And I was just like, it has to be Guy. Guy has to be his mentor. And so, yeah, I just went from there and did this funny body horror thing with Guy in the ring. And yeah, I really like it. Green Lanterns are really tricky for me. I'm a fan, but I don't feel like I'm naturally a good Green Lantern writer. Like, I think it takes certain things. Like, I don't do the cosmic stuff well. I like just being a fan of that, not trying to play with it. And so it was, I knew I needed to really bring my A game to make Guy Gardner as good as I want him to be all the time. And yeah, I was pretty happy. People seemed pretty horrified and amused by what happens to Guy. So I was happy to get to do that to him.
It was also funny. It's like, oh, he's dead, and he's like,
yeah. It
was a nice little twist.
Yeah, I think the Green Lanterns are so powerful. It's fun to play with how much they can do and stuff. I fell in love with the Green Lantern stuff on like the Hard Traveling Heroes era of like Green Lantern, Green Arrow, where he's really just a guy who punches things with a big green fist, like he can fly. And now they're kind of like gods, and so it was fun to kind of play with the bigger tool set that they have now.
Was when you were deciding, which characters were going to be vampires and which were going to be the humans, were you making those choices, or did they were there editorial?
Mostly it's me. The book was actually started. The book was originally pitched by James Tynion,
mm-hmm.
and it was going to be his project when he finished Batman, and then he didn't finish Batman. His Batman was a big hit, and DC asked him to stay, and he didn't have time. And so he handed it to me, but it was really just a one-page pitch document. And he was like, here's the idea. And so some of the stuff he knew, Nightwing being the vampire king in the start was a James bit. I'm trying to remember who else was James's vampires. He always wanted to start the book with I Vampire. He thought that was really important. And I thought it was great. But he didn't have a lot of the details weren't filled in. So a lot of who ends up on what side was me. James, I love him. He's you can take the boy out of Gotham, but you can't take Gotham out of the boy. He's always going to lean towards doing a Bat Family book. And so they were the main characters in the book. And I love the Bat Family. They're my favorite characters in the DC universe, other than the the Wildcats, and I wanted to do. But you get this stage, you get a book that people are going to show up to regardless. It's not built on Batman. Like, you can't take Batman out of Batman. You can't do a Detective Comics book without Batman. You can't do Nightwing and not have Nightwing in it. But we had a book where the audience was going to show up and with no guarantee of who was in the book. And so I made the decision early that I was like, we're going to turn some of the Bat family into vampires and take the rest off the board, because it's, let's give some other characters a little more spotlight. And so that was the idea on the guiding principle on a lot of the choices.
And it also offered you a chance to kind of revisit your Wildcats characters too.
Yeah. We have Grifter and Zealot pass through, which they're multiverse hopping people by nature. So it just made sense to me that they would pop in and be living in the worst existence possible and fighting for their lives. That's sort of their MO. So yeah, I my editor on DC vs. Vampires at the time, the editor who started the book, Ben Abernathy, was also my editor on Wildcats, and he was an old Wildstorm editor. So I knew it didn't take a lot to convince him to be like, let's put Grifter in here. And he'll just be like, hell yeah, let's put Grifter in here. So yeah, I was very lucky in that regard.
So bigger picture now. As a writer, who inspires you, and who, do you? I don't want to say want to imitate, but maybe emulate, maybe, or
Man, I'll just do in comics because it's kind of, I could just go on all day. I'm a huge Bendis fan. Brian Bendis is like, one of the reasons I make comics, and is such an inspiration to me. I love the way he builds a story with character first, and just always his characters are the driving principle of everything he does, and that to me is a big inspiration, and very much someone I would want to emulate. And we would all be lucky to have a career half as good as Brian's. I'm a huge Alan Moore fan. I think everyone who writes comics to some degree is a big Alan Moore fan. But he just changed the way I think about comics all the time. I don't know. There's a ton. Like, it's I could go on all day. The Hernandez brothers, like Love and Rockets, to me is just a huge inspiration of what the medium can be. It's everything that it can be. It's a pure love letter to comics, and just purely at the whim of what the creators are in the mood for, and yet it's allowed to grow old gracefully and sort of mature with them and age with them in this wonderful way. So that's a big one for me. I'm a huge, like, everything Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips do. Like, those books are just the most important comics to me, and it's very cool to watch creators do things entirely on their own terms and just be like, this is what we do, this is how we do it, you can show up or not, we don't really care. Like, that's really inspiring. Just from an artistic standpoint, that you can tell that they're making things that are fulfilling for themselves and not trying to impress anyone else. They're not chasing a specific audience or a mood or a sales figure or a film executive. They're just making things they love to make, and that's always great. Those are sort of really a lot of the big ones for me. Brian K. Vaughan's a big one for me. But then there's a lot of others, like, Ann Nesenti was such an influence for me. On, like, her Daredevil is I'm a it's Frank Miller and then Ann Nesenti right below on what that character can be, and I feel like I really, when I was at Marvel, that's a creator that I really sort of tried to emulate a lot in what I was doing. I hope she wouldn't take issue with that statement and look at what I did and be like, oh, but she was always a sort of a guiding light on that stuff. And yeah, I mean, I could do that all day. I could just list people, but there's a ton. I read comics, every single day. I'm always sort of looking at being inspired by them and being intimidated by them and falling in love with the medium all over again. So, ask me that question in a week, I might give you a completely different answer. But
now, do you have a certain process for your writing? I know we talked about, like writing for the different books, but do you have like or is it when the mood hits you, or whenever whoever's shouting louder?
Yeah, no, I don't have the luxury of that stuff. It's a very, I'm not a fast writer. I'm pretty slow, which, I tell that to people and they're confused by it because I'm pretty prolific. Um, there was a while where I was doing 40 or 50 comics a year, and that's, about as much as anyone is doing. But I find that, the fastest writers, like people like Josh Williamson, Charles Soule, like those guys work much quicker than me. I sort of struggle and fight my way through the keyboard all the time, and to get a script out, it's always like pulling teeth a little bit. So no, my process is just I wake up and I start working, and I work all day, and I, take a 20-minute break for lunch, and I take a 40-minute break for dinner, and then other than that, I'm just working. And I work from 11 in the morning to 3 or 4 in the morning every night, 7 days a week. It's horrible. It's not good for you. I'm not. I say that, and I don't want people to be like, that's, I don't want to give off the impression that I'm bragging or being like I work harder than other people. I'm an idiot, and so I don't have a good work-life balance and a good separation on that stuff. So my process is just work all the time to try and stay ahead of people.
Are there any character? I mean, you've written a lot of different characters. Are there any characters that you haven't had a chance to write yet, or anybody you'd want to work with? On future projects.
I mean, characters is funny because I've sort of written my way. Big projects like DZ vs. Vampires, where you can just throw anyone in it, sort of. Like I haven't written a lot of Guy Gardner, but I can't say I never wrote Guy Gardner. I wrote, a 20-page Guy Gardner story. I actually wrote another Guy Gardner story too, but so I've written 30 pages of Guy Gardner. But and that's true at Marvel too, that there isn't like a ton of that stuff. And Archie was a big one for me, and getting to write the Archies sort of was pretty great. And I made sure that I could put Sabrina in there because I'm a big Sabrina fan, and so I was like, Sabrina has to show up in an issue. I think the big one for me, the big like Mount Rushmore thing that I've never done that I would love to do is G.I. Joe. Just write just a G.I. Joe issue, a one shot, a short story, something that I could just be like, I did it. I told story for my faves, going back to when I was a little kid. And after that, no, I like there's characters I love and I would love to go back to them, but there's nothing that really sticks out particularly more than that. As for people I like to work with, yeah, I mean, it's infinitely long. There's always a million. I mean, there's editors I would love to work with. There's a billion artists, from people who are just starting out, and I see their stuff and I'm like, that's great. I would love to work with them, to, legends. And, I'd love to work with Todd McFarlane. I'd love to work with, I was going to say Walt Simonson, but Walt Simonson actually did a cover for me. But sort of the list is infinite, like of people I'd love to work with someday. Every new project is sort of a chance to fall in love with someone else's work, and that's really the best part of the job. So,
who's your favorite G.I. Joe character?
That's a toughie. That is a toughie. I mean, it feels stupid to say Snake Eyes, but I really do love Snake Eyes. But also, I'm a big Shipwreck guy. I think Shipwreck's amazing. But I'm also really partial to Cobra. I like the Crimson Twins. I like Destro's awesome. I love Baroness. Like all those characters, they're just so many good characters. Like Larry Hama really made me fall in love with all of them, and I never gave that up. But yeah, I pretty much like everybody up until Cobra Law appears, and then I don't like them particularly. Which is funny because they're, Cobra Law stuff's in the comics, and Josh Williamson is doing that stuff, and he's doing such a good job that I'm like, I shoot him a message when I'm like, I'm really mad at you for making me like these characters. Like, I don't want to care about Nemesis Enforcer, but he's really fun. Like, so yeah.
So, looking back on your entire career, what advice, what do you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning of your career?
Oh man. Um, I wish I knew when to say no to projects that I wasn't in love with. When you're I mean, it's true of just being a freelancer. I'm very privileged to be in a place where I'm comfortable and I can make choices based on what I want to do, not what I need to do. But when you're a young freelancer, the most terrifying thing in the world is running out of work. And I don't want to put something nefarious onto it, but like people know that, publishers know that every freelancer is afraid of that, and they'll do things to make that happen and to use that because that's their job is to get books out of people and be a profitable company. And it's not. I don't think I'm telling tales out of school when I say like these companies are major corporations. Some of them are the largest entertainment corporations in the world, and they are less concerned with my mental health or financial stability and more concerned with the bottom line of the books and their annual reports. And so they will use any tools at their disposal to make you to sort of get you a new book. And it's not just that, not just talking about being sort of fear tactics, but also like it's very easy to walk into the Marvel office and have someone talk to you about something and they're excited about it and it's infectious and you get excited about it, but actually it's not a good fit for you and it's not something you should be doing. And it took me a long time to realize like I there's some things I did that I should have said no to. There's some things
Mhm,
that like I'd be okay if I'd said no, and you know, I put out a book that I don't love, and that's a
mhm,
bummer to look back on things and be like, that wasn't my favorite, and that's you're always going to have that, but it's a big one to know. Like I wish I could go back and say, yeah, you can pass on that. It's fine. You'll be fine. And maybe I wouldn't have been fine if I passed on it, but that's what I would like to happen.
yeah. And have you ever received any advice from somebody else in the industry that kind of is stuck with you, as you on your journey?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of advice. The uh Brian K. Vaughan, actually, the thing I just said was a piece of advice he gave me, which was, he said when you start out, the the power of you as a writer is being able to say yes to everything. Like being a guy that they can count on is very important. And he said at a certain point, the power comes from being a guy who can say no. Um, you make yourself indispensable and then you use that, and that's advice that I think is really smart. And he gave it to me at a point when I wasn't ready to hear it, and now I look back and I'm very appreciative of it. I think that was a big one. I think I think I'm trying to think of other stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I sort of keep close to the heart that maybe I don't want to share on the air.
No, that's fine.
Um, but
I
yeah,
understand.
I think a big thing is someone told me once like these companies, as much as you love these characters and these companies, like they'll never love you back. Like it's a job. Like remember that, and because it's very easy to forget that and sort of be head over heels at the honor, which it is an honor and the privilege to get to write these characters, and forgetting that also it's a business and it's your job, and the publishers don't forget that they are running a business and they're very aware of that, and they love their jobs and they're good at them and all that, but they are making business decisions and you need to be doing the same, otherwise you're entering on uneven footing.
Mhm. So I had a question. I lost it there. I'll get it back. So great. This is why it's great to have two hosts because when somebody blanks,
Sure, sure.
but um, So, oh, I know what it was. I know you've kind of talked about it, but what is your personal feeling on the comic industry and where it's headed? Right now, because you have a
Um,
you have a foot in the creator owned and a foot in the.
yeah. Um, I comics is funny because when I was a fan, when I was just a fan and I didn't work in the business, everyone would tell me comics is dying, comics is dying. And then I started working, and when you start getting work, everyone tells you this is dying. You're going to need to find another job. And you know, I'm 10 years into a career, and I sell more books now than I ever thought I would. And people still tell me like this is dying. And I think there's a real comics. Comics in a lot of ways has internalized a real underdog mentality in a bad way. Um, comics does not think of itself as a scrappy, fun, cool underground medium. Comics thinks of itself as as a sickly little brother to the film and TV business, and I hate that a lot. Um, there's a lot about comics that is much more impressive, much more inspiring, much more creative than film and TV. Like it just is. Like if you take a lot of comics creatives and drop them in a film TV setting, they'll get it. They'll understand the workload, they'll understand the demand and the job, and it doesn't necessarily go the other way. Obviously everything's specialized, and I don't want to be like writing a TV show is easy once you've written a comic. It's definitely not. But comics is such a volume business. It's such a deadline driven business. It's such a like tightly ruled industry in terms of how it all works, but also how the medium works, that I think it's really in a lot of ways sort of the most impressive of all the sort of visual arts, or you know I like it more than all the other arts combined. But um and so I'm always sort of shocked by, one, how willing comics professionals are to sort of kowtow to other industries, but also how much comics acts like it's dying and like it's a sick thing. And like, yeah, we all wish we sold more books. And like, there are people who are having a hard time in comics, 100%. Like there are, it's a hard time to be a shop because it's a hard time to be a small business in America. It's a hard time to be a small publisher because it's a hard time to be in publishing in any medium. Like these are
It's a hard
not,
time to be in America these days.
it's exactly, yeah, it's a hard time. And we act like we're the only industry that deals with it. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, talk to someone in video games, talk to someone in film, talk to someone in music. Like it's hard. Um, but I also think from that, we've hit a sort of comics has a fun, when you look at the larger arcs of it, there's sort of these great moments of what's dominant and what's not. And I think we're entering a period where we're coming out of a period where it was a lot about speculation and collecting and these legacy characters that are driven by movies and 80-year-old franchises. And every time that happens, it sort of goes the other way, and sort of ideas become the most important thing, and character and creativity and independent stuff. And so I think we're entering that now, and you see it like the last time was sort of the rise of books like Saga and Sex Criminals and Pretty Deadly and Wicked and the Vine, and there was sort of just this amazing renaissance. And I think you're going to be seeing that now. I think you're seeing the first starts of it. There's a lot of great indie books that people are going to be talking about for years to come, and that stuff's exciting because it gets new people in the stores, and that's what we need.
Anything else you wanted to say about the new book or any?
you know we're taking everyone down with us is out March 26th. We're really proud of it. It's funny because when I talk about it, I tend to lean one way or the other, where I'm like, it's really funny and like wild and wacky, and it's like pretty violent, and it's a little girl and a robot going to war. And then people read it and think like, oh, it's kind of intense and there's a lot of emotion to it, and it's about guilt and regret and like legacies of family and the impact of violence on people's lives. But then if I go the other way and I say all that stuff, people are like, but it's got a lot of jokes in it. And so I don't know what to say other than
Just got to find that happy medium.
yeah, it's we're not trying to make something that's for everyone, but we are trying to make something that is very much for us and something that we believe in and care about and love, and with the hope that there are other people out there like us who like the same kind of stuff we do, and we'll find the book and it'll feel special because it is a very deeply personal book that we're really doing everything we can to make as good as it can be. And I would like to think that there's an audience for that. I hope there is. I don't know what this job is if there isn't.
Because comics are dying.
Yeah, of course. That's the point, is that comics are dying, and next year we're all going to not have them. So we might as well. And not only are they going to die, they're going to take your old comics from you probably. So like this one now, because it might be the last one you ever get to read.
And where can people, find your stuff or find you on social media?
Yeah. I use Ashcan Press, ASHCANPRESS, and I have all those terrible social media platforms. So I have a Facebook, and it's awful, and I have a Twitter, and it's even worse, and I have an Instagram, and it's not as bad but pretty bad, and I have a Blue Sky, and that one's all right. And I'm on there. I wish I wasn't on all those places, but I still am. But I also have ashcanpress.com, which is my website, and it's the home of my newsletter. It's really just a platform for a newsletter, but there's you can buy some stuff and read my weird bio. But we have a newsletter we do every week, and most weeks it's just a podcast. I have a podcast that I do with my buddies Ethan Parker and Griffin Sheridan, who are comic writers. They made the excellent Kill Your Darlings at Image last year. And yeah, we just have a podcast called Ideas Don't Bleed, which we do, and you can listen to it on podcast places, and you get the idea. It's a podcast. But if you sign up for the newsletter, you get that and some bonus stuff sent to you every week, and that's sort of the best. In an ideal world, I wouldn't be on Twitter anymore, and I would just have the newsletter, and people could comment, and we could talk through that. So
yeah, it's kind of a necessary evil right now.
Yeah. It feels like it's working hard to make itself less necessary all the time, and it's daring me to not. But I'm still on all those places for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat this evening. Sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning, but we worked through it, and
we did it.
And it was great finally getting in touch with you. I know I think I messaged you a year or so ago, and
yeah. I was like, I promise I'm making new stuff and I want to talk about it. It just takes sometimes it takes a long time to make a book. But no, this was super fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, if you ever have anything else you'd like to talk about, you're more than welcome back, and I'm sure my co-host will be here this time and maybe have a little more challenging questions.
This is great. I loved it. So,
but as he says, the world can be in a terrible place these days, but do something good for somebody. Support your local bookstore, comic stores, bookstores, and all that, and just be good to each other and do something nice every day.
yeah,
and we'll get through it, I guess.
That's great. That's great advice.
And well, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch.